Hello, I'm Li Hao. Today I'm going to talk about Playwright Component Testing. The reason I'm going to talk about this topic is that recently at work, I was looking into refactoring a very legacy React component which was written many years ago. And because the component itself uses a lot of APIs on the browser, like the scroll position, history, and I realized that it is not as easy to mock this, to use Jest to do a basic unit test on this component. Because usually when you do a unit test with Jest, you usually use it with, say, maybe Enzyme or React testing library, and both solutions usually uses a JS DOM, which is a mock DOM implementation. But using that, maybe it's useful for simple components, but for components that depends on more browser APIs like the scrolling listener, scroll positions, and then also on like history changes, those kind of APIs, it's a bit hard to mock those things and to test it reliably. Okay, so I decided that maybe I heard about this Playwright component testing, which is in experimental stage, but that was interesting to learn about it, so I decided to try and use it. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to share with you more on what is the component testing, but I'm not going to go in depth about teaching you how to use it. I will definitely walk through a bit like how you can use it, but it will be the same as how you write Playwright tests on a page, but for this it's testing on a component level, right? Of course, like why would I want to use component testing but not use a Playwright test like the default Playwright test? Well, Playwright is usually for a browser end-to-end testing where you visit a URL and then you load a page and then you do a session on the page itself. But this what I want to test here is just a component, right? I don't want to build a whole page to set up a dev server to serve a page just to test that one component. So I decided to try out the Playwright component testing. Right, so in this video, I'm gonna walk through, share a bit on the component testing itself, and more on actually on the second part of this video is I'm gonna try to understand how does it actually works, what is happening under the hood, because when I dig further, I was quite surprised how it works. And hopefully in the third part of this video, I'm going to try to see whether, based on my understanding of how it works, to see whether I can actually recreate it myself, right? So to basically create this testing library, okay? As you can see later on, as I'm going to go through with you, the Playwright component testing is actually a separate library, a separate package they can install from the existing Playwright package, and that package itself extends the Playwright fixtures. It creates a new fixtures called a mount, and so it is quite separate. So what I'm gonna do when I'm gonna implement this in the third part of this video is I'm gonna implement that package itself, not the whole Playwright. Okay, Playwright is of course too complex to make from scratch. But who knows? Maybe I will try one day. But that's what I'm gonna do. Okay. So from I guess from this explanation about this video, I guess you probably would guess that this video is gonna be a long one, and you probably have see the duration of this video. Yes, it is gonna be a long one. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna I'm gonna add sections in this video. So if you're interested in any part of this, you can quickly jump into, right? So the first part or second part or the third part, right? So first part is brief introduction of Playwright, and then second part is gonna read about the docs and try to figure out actually how it works, and the third part is gonna re-implement the Playwright component testing. Okay, sounds good. So let's take a look at what is Playwright's component testing. So here I have a very basic setup, a component, which is a counter component that, as you can see here, has nothing. Okay, it has a button where you can click, and it has a count value, which which shows the value of this count, right? And then when you click on it, it will increment the counter. So here, I have this component and I want to test it, right? And I want to use Playwright Component Testing to test this component. So I'm here with my docs about Playwright Component Testing. Okay, so I probably will include the link in the description. And here, the setting up, basically this is the example setup of the test. I will later on try and implement this for my counter component. But to get started, here is what you need to run to install Playwright and set up Playwright for component testing. So here I'm gonna open my terminal. I'm gonna run this command. And I decided to use TypeScript, and I'm testing for React 18, so I'm gonna hit enter, and also help me install the browsers that I'm needed. Okay, so I probably will one day try and see how it works for Svelte and explore that in a separate video. But because at work I was using React, and I decided to try out the React version. Right, so after the wizard setup completes, you have installed the browsers and stuff like that. It creates a few files over here. First thing is it has this Playwright CT config.js. I guess this is a separate configuration file than your usual Playwright config, right? There's -ct. So if you can run your Playwright testing and the Playwright component testing side by side with each other, it doesn't conflict. So here there's also including a new command called testct, which tests the component testing Playwright test with this configuration file. I think I need to install Playwright as well, right? Because else, okay, I need to install Playwright. Right, so the setting up assumes that you already have Playwright installed, so you just install this Playwright experimental. Okay, so back to this configuration file. Nothing interesting to look at here. This is your very standard Playwright configuration. If you're interested to learn about Playwright, I think there's a ton of resources out there. Or maybe one day I might try to work on it. But for now, this I'm gonna brief through over here. One thing different is that, of course, instead of define config based on the Playwright car, is actually defined based on the experiment CT, right? And the reason is that it actually has more things that you can add for Playwright component testing. For example, like the CT port and other configuration. So this config is adding on to default Playwright config additional new options specifically for experimental CT React. Right. So once we have this, then also Playwright will also install, create a very simple testing page for you to test your components, right? And the main thing is there's this element with ID called roots, which they will mount a component on this page. This basically will explain it in the second part of the video, but basically we'll create these two files, okay? And then now I'm gonna write some tests for my components. So I'm gonna create a file called maybe component.test.tsx, right? So to write a test, it's we can start copying from here, right? Of course, we need to import the test from the CT React, right? And then we're gonna test click should able to increment when after clicking on the button. Okay, so here. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to mount this component. So mount, and I'm going to import our component, our counter component, right? So this is how I mount it. Probably need to import React. So I mount my component, and then I need to expect this component to contain maybe a value called, it will start with 0, right? So to contain 0. Hold on, something feels off over here. Expect. Hold on, let me see. Expect from here and then mount. Oh, okay, we need to await the mount to contain text. I guess the expect, if this is, it depends on, I guess the TypeScript will depends on what we have over here, and then it gives us different type definition, right? So if this is something like a mount result, then we have the contain text. Right, so we contain this text, and then because this component only have one button, so I'm gonna click on this, right? We're gonna click on, we have a click event onto the component itself, and then we expect await the component to contain text 1. Okay, so this should be our test, and then let's try to run our test. So I'm gonna say pm test ct. We'll run. And hold on, rollup failed to. Okay, I think we probably need to have both React and React DOM as our dev dependency. So I'm gonna install React DOM as well. I should have mentioned this somewhere, but I don't know. Okay, so I run my test. So you can see that it is using vids for building. It uses vids for building, and then it, after it builds and it runs the test, and then that's all, and then you can see a report, right? And that's it. That's how you write a component test. But if you want to actually see how it works, you can run with the debug option. Hold on. I think like this. Right? So it will spin out a Chrome browser and an inspector, and then you can step through, right? So this is our component over here. It is mounted, as you can see here, it is mounted into the roots over here. And so as you step through and it clicks, so you can see I'm clicking on this button, and then it shows 1, and then this is my assertion to expect this component to contain text 1, and then I mean it works. And of course, because we test on multiple different browsers, this is for Firefox, step through. And then lastly, we're also testing for Safari. So this is for Safari, right? It opens up, we step through, it clicks on it, and now it has 1, and then that's it, right? So you're running browser tests. You are actually mounting this component onto the browser, and then perform user interactions on the browsing on the page, and then expect, and then you hope that and then you do perform assertion to make sure that it matches your expectations. And that's basically like a browser test, but just test for a components. So how does this actually work, right? So as you can see here, as I try to explore slowly, you realize that yes, it opens a browser and then loads a page. And what is that page? That page is basically from this Playwright index.html. This is the page that will load. And then it has this element called root, where they will mount the component int there, right? So you mount this component, and then once the component is mounted, right? So how does it mount, right? It will actually based on what you write here, right? So when you mount this counter, then it will mount, when you write this, you'll mount the counter component there, and then it will onto the browser, and then you will perform like operations and assertions on the browser itself, right? And of course, this code we just import from our source code, and we need to load all this code, right? This code in the browser as well. So how the Playwright component testing works is that it uses vids to build this component and load it into the browser, and then And so you can actually load this whole code there, right? Okay, so let me copy this and create another test. This time around, I'm going to create a test with 2 counter components. Okay, so let's see. Maybe remove the page.pause. On second thought, okay, so let me put back the page.pause. And I see. Okay, I think let's try and run the test. Run. Oh, a second. 2 counter buttons. Okay, so here I am running this test. So this, I assume, is my first test. Step through, works. And now, seemingly on the same page, but now we are mounting 2 components. Right? Two counter components on the same place. And then if you click on it, right, you're clicking the parent div, so it doesn't do anything. So this assertion fails, I guess. Yeah, but because there's 2 buttons, we can actually component.locate or get by role button. And is there a way to get the first button? I'm not sure. Okay, so get by role button and click. I think this one may get me into trouble because I clicking 2 buttons. At the same time, I'm gonna get by query. Query. Hold on, component dot find. Wait, what's the get by? Hold on, maybe I make changes to this over here instead. Right, so I have the data test ID goes to so I have a default ID. So the second one I'm gonna say ID equals to button 2. First one is button 1, so I can differentiate 2 of them. Let's save this. Get by test ID. Click on the button. And then I expect basically this button to contain the text 1. Right? So if I try and run again, here I have the first test. Right? Step through. I have second test. We can find the first button, click on it, and I expect the first button to contain 1, and it works, and the test pass. Right? So actually the mount is the key here. The mount will actually mount this whatever you write here, your React pre, say, into the browser, right? So one thing I was quite amazed or find it interesting is that I remember that Playwright actually runs like this code over here that you have actually runs not in the browser but in your node environment, right? And one thing I can prove this is that I can import, say, a file system, right? And I can maybe import path from path, right? And let me just remove this one. We don't really need this to show that. Oh, let's skip this test first. Or the other way around. I'm gonna run this test only. And if you see here, I can actually fs write. I'm gonna use the promise-based file system. I'm gonna write file and based on the current directory. Around a.txt. And the content is gonna be hello playwright. Right, so you can see I can write file, and I also could maybe read something off from the file. So maybe I have a b.txt. Right, say here this is a playwright. I can read this file. Right, read the content from the file. I'm gonna pass it in as my ID. And later on, you can see that actually it would work as well. So here I'm gonna get, I'm gonna click right here. I'm gonna get by test ID playwright. Hold on, let me just copy in case I typo. Right, playwright. Right, so here the ID is direct. It is from this file. So one thing I want to prove to you here is that this actually runs in node environment. It can read this file, right? If it's in a browser, then how the hell does it know what's the directory name, and how the hell does it able to read a file using like Node API, right? These are Node APIs, right? I mean, maybe it can work, but it must be gone through some way magic to make it work, right? But I feel like actually no, it's not. It is running on your Node environment. And here I'm going to also do some console log to show you that it can print logs in your console as well. And not on the browser console. And then we mount this, and then we make some tests, right? And then we'll click on the element that has this playwright ID, right? If it does not exist, it cannot be clicked. And this will not be able to click. It will throw an error. And also here you cannot contain the text called 1. Right, so I'm going to run this test. This time around also in the debug mode. And as you can see, this is printed here, right? The playwright content is printed over here. And if I inspect here in your browser, nothing happened, right? It's just not running in your browser. It is running in your node environment, right? So as you step through, and then you realize that I'm able to find this. Am I able to find? Oh no, shit. Yes, the test ID is called playwright. I'm trying to click it, but somehow I couldn't find it. Wait, get by test ID called playwright. I'm stuck here. Why? Get by test ID. Did I write the same thing here as well, get by test ID button. But it works. Maybe I add a div over here. Maybe it will help. Right? This is my guess. Let me try and see whether it works. So here, step through. Yay! I'm able to click it. Okay, so why does it work? Well, it was because I saw this .locator internal control equals to component, and I guess like maybe if it seems like it finds the root element, and then from root element it finds inner to find this locator, and then from that element it tries to find its children, whether a component that has a test ID called Playwright. But because the element, the button, is the same as this this component over here, it cannot find its children that has the test ID called Playwright. That's why it has issue. But if the root of our component is a div, and then it tries to find whether the children has a test ID called Playwright, it works. Okay, so this is just my lucky guess, but also quite interesting that it has this thing called internal control equals component, which I don't know what is this, because I definitely, let me zoom this in. I definitely didn't see any components here at all. So must be something and so this locator must be something interesting that it adds to this some selector that I don't know how it works, right? Internal control equals component. Not quite sure what is this this thing is, right? Usually locator is where you write your query selector, but this doesn't looks like some of our usual CSS selectors that we know of. Okay, so I don't know, but that's how it works, right? So here I've shown to you that Playwright, the code in your Playwright testing, in your component testing, this code runs in your node environment. But your testing, your component you're mounting is on the browser environment. These are two separate environments, right? The console, you don't see this console printing out on the browser. It prints out in your node environment. So it's two separate environments. So one thing that amazed me, or I find it interesting, is that in that case, then how do we actually mount this component over here onto the browser, right? This thing runs in your node environment. This component you import is in your node environment. How the hell that this thing is able to run something on the browser? It's totally different, right? So it's I was like, huh? How does it even work, right? So let me first kill my Playwright test first. So actually, I'm quite impressed that they actually write this down in this component testing page documentation. It actually does have this thing called under the hood. Okay, it actually tells you how this works. So once when you run the test, right, Playwright actually creates a list of components that the test need. Okay, and it compiles a bundle that includes this component and serve it using a local static web server. Upon the mount call within a test, Playwright actually navigates to the facade page, which is this thing of this bundle, and tells it to render the component. So actually the mounts, right? When you do the mount, what it does is actually it navigates to this page, and then it loads that bundle, and then it tells the component, it tells the browser to actually mount this component. So there must be some sort of serialization happening, right? Let me draw this out clear. Hopefully it's clearer. So here the first thing is we have your browser. Oh, let me create extra big. This is your browser. Oh, let me zoom to the normal zooming size first. Okay, no wonder it's so let me no wonder the text was small. Okay, no, this is too small. Large. Okay, this is just nice. So this is your browser, and then this is probably your node environment. Right? So when you do mount, when you write something like mount hello world, when you do this, it actually instructs the browser. It tells the browser to open the page. So it's the Playwright Playwright. It opens this page, and then it finds the element with the ID root. Right, it finds this element, and then tries to mount div hello world onto that element, right? And if you're familiar with React, if you understand how React works, right? Usually when you write in JSX expressions, it is transpiled into functions, JSX functions, which then returns what it actually returns. It will transpose into a JSX function call, and that call will return some JSX object, which sometimes you hear people talking about your React tree, your virtual DOM, or something like that. But basically, it's an object of a representation of your React tree, right? So I guess from here, when you call mount, right, this is what we write, right? But then after having like the transpilation, what actually it looks like is like this, right? You have type equals div, and then props is maybe something like this, and then you have maybe like have children, which is hello world. So imagine what we write is this, but what actually it gets what we write is this, but what actually the browser sees is something like this. Okay, it's calling mounts with an object. So I assume that what actually happens is that it will actually call it will visit this page and then send this information over to like this thing. Like serialize this and send this over. Whoops. Send this over to the root, and then from there on, it takes this and then it mounts this mount these elements on the browser, right? Because when you write something like react dom.render, you create a root and then you render with something like, when you write something that looks like this, right? Create root, render this thing. This is also the same as doing this one, right? So we can take this object and then we pass it into the render function and it will render the thing in the root, right? So when you call mounts on the node environment, actually it sends this information over to the browser and it renders that, and then you have handle, and then you use like the Playwright commands and stuff like that to actually interact with the browser and then do the assertion over there, right? So this is what how it actually works, and I can show you that it is like this, right? Because first of all, maybe here we have the page dot pause, open a page from here. Oh wait, and then let's try to run our test. I'm gonna show you. Hopefully, I can show you that this way. I have a page, right? It's paused over here. And I'm gonna inspect, and you can see that there's nothing here in the root. Okay, and also I have turned on logs and everything on the network. And then if I step through, hold on. When I step through, and then you see that I am doing the, okay, I step through and I've called the mount, and now I have something in the root here, right? It is mounted over here. So when I first visit, it's empty, right? And only when I call mount, it will do something causes this thing to it must be sending some messages, right? So here I can't really tell, is there any like communication over here? Besides the normal HTTP network request. If you know how to figure that out, let me know. But it seems like I can't see any thing over here that shows that it's making a request or have a new connection over here. Let's see, application. No, I don't know how. Right, so you can assume that it's probably sending something, and then upon receiving that request, it tries to, mount, and then realize that maybe it needs a component, and it loads that component, and then it mounts it onto the DOM, and then you do a perform interaction, and then assertions, and that's the Playwright stuff, right? But for Playwright component testing itself, I think this thing, it works. It's quite it fascinates me. I was like, I never thought about this way, and I mean, maybe it's like theoretically you think that okay, maybe this is possible, but you never you didn't know that actually people do that, right? So you can send this component tree over here and then run. And the second thing that is interesting is that I mean, it's simple to understand that this mounts if it's a normal div, but one thing you need to know is that this one is not a normal we are not just doing div, we are doing component, right? A counter. And when you have counter that looks like this, what actually happens is that it will pass in this, the function, the component itself, the component function and component class itself as the type, right? So when I send over here like this wouldn't work, right? You cannot send, I mean, you have to serialize it. You cannot send a function over, and it doesn't work like that, right? So it must have a way to, my understanding is it must have a way to serialize this to counter, right? To something like this. Counter, I don't know, maybe some string, some serialization, and then from there it must be able to figure out, okay, this refers to this counter component, and I want to load this counter component in to my code and into the browser to use that, right? So the component you have in your node environment, the function that you import over here, is not the same as the function that you have in the browser, right? It's two separate things, right? So the browser, the function it runs in the browser environment and function it runs in the node environment, it runs in two separate environments. It's two different things, right? So must have done some serialization to translate the function in a node environment to some string representation, and then go to the browser, and then from there you reverse the process to figure out what is the actual function that it should load, what's the component it should load on the browser, and then import that and then execute that, right? To me, that is very fascinating, okay? And to the extent that I decided to make a video of it and decided to figure out like, try to implement it myself through this video, okay? I have after explaining this, after figuring out how this works, I have a rough idea how it works, but to be honest, I didn't prepare about how to implement it, so I'm gonna do this in real time in this video together with you, right? So that is the part 3 of this video, where we're gonna implement this Playwright component testing package, this thing, right? So this whole thing, it works from this Playwright experimental CT React, this package itself, right? It is a totally separate package from the normal Playwright that we have. It's an add-on. It has this because in Playwright you can extend the test function, and it can extend the expect function. You can extend the config function as well. So that's what this package does. It extends from the default Playwright test and expect, and provides you a new fixtures called mount. And so I guess that's where we're gonna do the bulk of our implementation is to figure out how to implement this mount function. Allow me to take a sip before we're gonna go on and implement the custom extends and test function of Playwright for component testing. So how shall we start? If you're not familiar with Playwright, I highly recommend you to go and take a look at Playwright documentation to figure out how to use it. And then there will be an advanced section on how you can create custom fixtures, how to extend the test function and expect function, have like custom matchers and stuff like that, right? They probably will be useful to figure those things out. Okay, so I'm not gonna, as I go through, I will briefly explain like conceptually how it works. But if you want to learn how to write those things, you probably will have to read the documentation yourself, right? So let's see how we can implement this custom test and expect function. First thing, of course, right now we're importing tests from Playwright, and that is something that we are going to implement ourselves. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a folder called custom CT component testing. I'm going to have my file called index.ts, and this is where we are going to implement this whole thing, right? So instead of exporting it from here, I'm going to import it from custom CT and exports. So here I'm going to have export function, the test, as well as export function extends. Expect. Firstly is I'm going to import the basic one from Playwright. Is it from Playwright or Playwright Core? I'm gonna sorry, I also can't remember how do I do that. So we're gonna say custom extends. Hold on, where is Playwright extend? Test.extends. Okay, I'm gonna import it from Playwright/test. Okay, so I guess we haven't installed that, right? We only install Playwright. Let me install this one. Playwright/test. No. So import Playwright test. I believe the let's take a look of our node. I believe like in our Playwright. Okay, where is Playwright? I believe like Playwright has dependency of Playwright Core, which probably have dependency of Playwright test. Hold on, it's not. You sure it's Playwright test or Playwright Core? Let's try out and see. This has the same. Okay, this one we're gonna have tests as well as the expect. So I'm gonna import this. Hold on. I'm gonna import this as base test and as base expect. Right, and then as you can see here, we can extend the Playwright this way. Let me copy this one. Let me copy also even the type definition. The expect, I'm gonna just expect the same. This is the base expect. So the expect function is the same for now, and then the test function is basically we're going to use the base test to extends, and I'm going to add something over here. So basically this is a TypeScript type definition for the additional parameters that we add, additional fixtures that we're going to add to our test. Right? So what is fixtures? Fixtures is basically this one. When you go to a test file, when you have page, you have mount, and all this, these are actually called fixtures. And you can have and fixtures are basically you can have you have built-in fixtures like page, browser, context, and all these fixtures are things that you can like provide APIs to the to your test test case itself. Okay, so when you define the fixtures over here, the way you define it is that you will create right now we're gonna create a new mount fixtures. Right, so this is the mount fixture, and the fixture itself, your custom fixtures, can also depend on other fixtures that is available to the built-in or by other fixture or by. It can depend on the built-in fixtures as well as custom fixtures that you define. Right, so here we're gonna have just one fixture which is called mount, and the use. So here this function is like a factory method on creating the mount fixture. So you can, how you write this custom fixtures is that you can set up here, like you have setting up, and then once you define like maybe the mount actual fixture function, like the mount itself, then you can call use to pass in that mount function. So this function itself will be eventually this thing over here. So whenever someone define like mount in this test case, what it does is that it will come to find out the fixture factory. You'll call this function and run through, and then with the use, where you basically get this thing, which will use your fixture, and this is where it will use this definition and provide it over here. So when you actually run your test case, you will have this function, which is this function over here, and this is how you're gonna use it, right? So also you can do cleanup after it's being used. So this cleanup here is actually where the this cleanup is actually where the where it will be executed after the test cases is finished, right? So after you call mount and then everything here, and then when you are done, when the test case is finished, this is basically where it is being, the cleanup is where it's being called. Okay, so if you can see the documentation here, right, you wait. Okay, I think we need to do a wait, right? A wait. So we'll wait for this use, this custom fixture, right? So so we'll wait for the test case to finish, and then here is where you do the cleanup. All right, so you have setup, and then you can define everything, and then you declare that okay, this function is the fixture, your custom fixture, and then you do a cleanup. Right? Here we have TypeScript errors because we haven't defined. We done this, but we haven't defined our definition, right? So we're gonna here is we're gonna define mount is actually a function, right? That returns any. So whatever you define here, you have to matches the use will expect what you're passing over here, right? So you can take in an argument, the React node. Let me see, import React from React. Is it this type definition? Oh, I think we don't have type definition because we didn't install types React, I think. Alright, so this React element string, all this is the React node we can pass in here. And then we return something. Right? So here this is our definition, right? That we just defined. And if we take in here, we say this is this can be object something, then this is wrong, right? The type definition doesn't match. Have to match this over here. So one thing is sure is that this mount, once you decided to use this fixture in a test case, then this function, this setting up function will be called, this factory function will be called, and then you will call the setup. So here, I think what we need to do is we need to set up our vid dev server to spin out the page that we're gonna visit, and we're gonna visit the page, right? Set up the vid dev server, and then we're gonna visit the page. And then in the mount function is where we are going to so this is the node, right? Node react.react node. I'm gonna serialize the node to a JSON. I'm gonna send the node over to the web page, and then we need to send to it, and then hopefully when it receives on the page, when the page receives, it should mount it on the root element, right? ID equals to root element. And of course, this mount function should return something. This gives us the locator, which, right, this should return us a locator where we can use this to do like, where you can pass into expect and then we do some assertion, right? So this should return a locator. Now we're gonna return just undefined as any. So type definition wise, we're gonna return a locator. So locator is something you can import from Playwright. I said this type definition is something you can import from Playwright. This is the handle when you use like the page.get something, or get by test ID, page by get by role, or page.locate something. This is where you get. Okay, so here now we have mount, we have basically have some idea of what we need to do and stuff like that. And after mount and cleanup phase, we need to implement. What we need to do is that we need to unmount the node from the page, and basically that's the cleanup. I think that's all we need to do, right? So here, first thing is we set up dev server. We see the page, right? So I guess this relies on us to actually use vid. So we're gonna install save dev vid. Okay, we have vid install, and then we're gonna use vid. And import vid from vid. So again, let's go and take a look at the vid's dev server node API, JavaScript API to see how we can create a vid server. So this is the function create server. And I'm not sure that you notice. Let's take a look at the Playwright ctconfig. We actually have this port called city port, and then this is 3100. right? This is the this itself, the use. This is also a fixture that you can read out this value, and this fixture to give us the specify the CT ports where we can use for our Playwright, right? So this is, we need to start the dev server at this current port. So let's try. Actually, let me clean up the test case first so that we can run them, and then we can see how we are going on so far in the process. So we run this test only. And then this is what we're supposed to, this test case supposed to pass. So mount, okay. I think type definition wise, this should be a promise locator. And this would be an async function. So here, yep. So we should be able to run this and then and see whether how far we can go along, right? This is the test case that we need to run. Of course, right now, if you try to run this, PM test CT, you run into the error and then you see this page and it fails, right? So let me get back. Actually, let me disable the open up the fill page. Is there a configuration? Playwright disable open HTML report when failure. Okay, the open property. So, someone actually write a blog about it. Let's take a look. Playwright reporter HTML open never. Okay, so let's not open the HTML reporter, because for now it's gonna fail almost every time. Right, so this is open never. Okay, so we run the test and then it fails. Okay, it will fail because right now we haven't done anything, right? So first thing is come back to this file, and we can here, as I said, your mount fixtures, this factory function can depend on other fixtures as well. And then when the other fixture is when you depend on other fixture, of course, it will also call their factory function to set up, and then they will have a use function to define that fixture, and then they also have clean up when everything is done, right? So here we're going to depend on this fixture called city port. Type definition wise, it's not here because it's not the default one. It's based on the Experience CT React, right? Let me see whether they have some type definition I can use. So Playwright test config. Define config Playwright test config. I'm not quite sure, but I guess we can copy this thing over here. Into our type definition. Right, so type option equals to this one. Maybe let's comment out some things that we will not implement in this video, or else it will be never ending. So we're gonna have city port only. This one, we're gonna add extend like this. Right, so here we already have access to city ports, just to show you that this is the value that we can get out. This is basic. This has a value. Let me print it out. Mount has unknown property city. Oh no, this doesn't. Fixture mount has unknown parameter city port. Okay, so I guess this here, mount fixture has unknown parameter. Eh? Where? I thought this is a custom fixture. Sorry. Let me check custom use. Using a fixture overriding fixture. Automatic fixtures options. Default item. Okay, maybe is this one the default. So we need to define it as options instead. So we need to define this as option. CT port. Default value maybe it's, let's say, 8000, but this is an option. And so since this is an option, probably it will be able to specify in the use in your configuration. Let's try and run this. As you can see here, the CT port is 3100 now. Here we have our ports, and we define the default value as 8000. If I can definitely disable this one, and you can see if I don't specify, then the value over here is 8000. But of course I can customize it, right? And here you can see now the value is 3100, right? So this is basically how your custom fixtures that, let me close this. Your custom fixtures, this is basically how your custom fixtures can have options that you can define in your Playwright config and eventually being used in your other fixtures, right? So this mount fixtures depends on the CT port fixture, and then this fixture, right, CT port, component testing port, is a fixture, but it's like a fixture options, where the type of this fixture is called option, and then this is a default value, right? So anyway, we have these fixtures now. We have this value now. I'm gonna set up a Vite dev server based on this current this port value. So we're gonna go back to the Vite documentation. We're gonna import create server, right? We have done that, and we're gonna start our server and listen to the URL, right? Server listen to this. So the config file, use any valid. Okay, so for now our config file is false. We don't depend on config file first. I'm gonna root is the root where we visit is, I'm gonna say the Playwright folder. So I'm gonna import path from node path, and here I'm gonna join this directory name with the Playwright. I think this is where the template directory options, if you have in the component testing, this is where you can customize it, but we are going from here. Playwright folder, server, the port is the CT port value, and I'm gonna start listening to the server. So I think this will resolve when the server finishes listening, and we can, and I guess we will need to visit this page, right, before we actually mount it. So we're gonna depend on a page fixture. So page dot go to this URL, http local host slash and then a port, which is the CT port. Right, await. And then we go to this this page, and then we wait. So let's try and run and see what do we get. We still don't get anything, right? So far, nothing yet. But let me see if I can now see something meaningful from the test cases, right? So here we can actually have page, and then here we are going to call await page.pause, so that so you're gonna start our debug mode again, and then we're gonna pause at this location so that we can see what we have so far. Right, so here we have start a dev server, and then we're gonna go to this page. Next. So here we're already visiting this localhost 3100. Inspect this. This is basically this whole. Right, you can refresh this page. This is this page, I think, right? So we are loading some JavaScript. Let's take a look what the JavaScript looks like. Hold on. Wait, this has everything in here. So something is a bit off. We didn't specify anything. So I think this page is not the one that we have so far. Let me try and delete some of the caches that we have so far. Right, maybe it does something behind the scenes previously and it's cached. Let me just kill this. Hold on, I think it says it's in use and trying another one. Okay, so let me try and check whether we have this pod running. Okay, never mind. So maybe one thing that we need to also do is let's just do cleanup first. We're gonna, after we're done, gonna close the server. Right. This also returns us a promise. Wait. Let's try run. The city again. Hold on. It kind of know that we need to build something. So this is definitely something that is okay. I think I roughly know what happened. So in here, we probably have done something in the define config that basically do the default building and stuff like that, which yeah, so for this one over here, we're probably gonna, for now, we're gonna import define config from Playwright Test, as well as the devices. So this is the default basic Playwright config that we have. Of course, this one we we need to define, but nonetheless should be okay now. Should not do anything extra than the default Playwright. So here, let me go and run or debug again. We're not building anything. Yep, we're not doing anything, and then we are here, stuck at this place, and then we can visit, and we can't even go to this URL. Okay, so probably like when we try to build, we're not even working. Okay, so let me try and run this again, right? And we spin out a page, and first thing is let's try and see whether we can visit this page. Right, it's not loading. So the dev server, although we say create and then listen, but it is not. Okay, we are not listening, but we are listening based on the pods over here, right? So the dev server is not working correctly. Let me firstly go and copy this code and then run this on a separate file first and see whether it makes sense. Okay, I think I roughly know why. Because this is in a different folder, right? So we need to step out and then go to the Playwright folder. Let's try again. So here, we should be able to visit some page. And if you inspect this page, it has basically as is based on this page like this, right? It looks as is the same. So this index.tsx, right? If you're gonna try to visit this, not doing anything yet. But it seems like it's at least we have this page. We can open this page, but we can't do anything with it yet. Alright, so kill this. So now the next thing is that we need to customize our build, right? So one thing we need to do is that we need to add some code into the we need to add some code into our HTML so that it will actually set up initialize that page correctly, where we able to wait for the mount message, right? The mount will actually send something to our HTML page. So we need to set up something over there. And so here we need to have that prepared and be ready to receive anything from. We need to run some code in the HTML itself, right? But the HTML looks like this, got nothing much over there. Then I guess the trick here is probably somewhere in the index.tsx, right? So here, maybe we do some console log hello, and then we see whether it we have anything over here. Let's see. Let me run this. Okay. We open this page, localhost 31,000. We have printed out something, right? So basically, I think the code is here, right? So what I'm gonna do next is I have an idea. We need to serve this page with something, basically with some initialization code. I'm gonna tag along with this index.tsx, right? So we're gonna add some custom vid plugin, like a load or transform plugin. When we're trying to read this file, we're gonna append some script, initialization script on top. And because this script is here for the user to add things to set up on the page, right? Like importing styles, initializing themes, or set up things, or set up like a before mount, after mount, stuff like that, right? But we go and also add things, add a bit of code on top of this file that does some initialization for us. So I do notice that every time we do this, it's a bit a hassle that we start a page. We need to start Playwright and then start Playwright and then start our vids, and then we need to like open the page and then kill it every time and then jump here and forth. So one thing I want to do here next is that I'm going to copy this code out to a separate file called create start vid server as a separate file, and I'm going to run this function. I'm going to iterate from here first. I'm going to call it init. Iterate from here first, and then iterate from here first, and then once we are done, then we copy the code over into our custom mounts fixture, right? So we have our city port. So here we're gonna call the init function with the ct port. Ct port equals to 1000. And of course we need to import things that we were importing. We probably can't run TypeScript directly from here. So let me install maybe like a Vite node to run Vite node to run our code. Hopefully that works. Let me try. pm Vite node custom ct index. No, not index. Start Vite server. Okay, I guess it runs, right? So I mean come here and then let's see localhost 3100. Okay, it seems like it's running okay, right? If I take a look at my HTML, inspect element, I have my testing page, I have my body, everything looks fine. And also if I go to my console, I still have my hello. Okay, it seems like this page is running well. So the next thing is we gonna come here and continue to iterate from here. Right, as I said previously, I want to have my server to able to add code to the existing index.tsx in this one index.tsx file. So we need to modify our vid config first and able to add a plugin to that vid config and then do something from there on. So first thing is we're gonna come here and let's see this one. How do I pass custom config to our vid create server? I'm gonna let's see vid inline config. I see. I guess this is the configuration itself already. So the config file is false, and then I believe we can add plugins like this directly. And then from here, we need to create a custom vid plugin. A plugin will have a transform function. Right, so we need to go jump in and take a look at the plugin API. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a transform function that we're gonna transform actually we just I think we can have a let's see a load function instead. Um, what is better? I think transform is fine, right? But the transform we need to make sure that we run in the right order, right? We need to transform before we actually transform by the vid itself. So here I think here we're gonna use the load function instead. Load is this one. Okay, so load, gonna have a load function instead. And then load basically takes in an ID and then return the load result. So here is the ID. And I can console log out the ID that the vid is trying to load. And of course, this one has a function called this.load and give us the ID. This gives us the, whoops. We can load. This gives us the information where the load function can eventually use it to return instead, right? The load result. I think that's how it works lah. Let's try and see. TypeScript is complaining over here. I think one thing we're missing is the name of the plugin. Custom component testing plugin. So the load result is quite different from the load from this dot load. So this dot load returns this whole thing, module info, but but what we need to return is the load result, which is a source description, which is AST code map, and the string or null value. So I'm going to return this AST and code, right? So we actually already have it over here. Just need to take these two out only. So I'm going to make this a async function. Result equals await this dot load, return code and AST. Sorry, return. Actually, let me the structure AST. And it's incompatible because I think it's a bit. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? I think, was it like this? Okay, I guess it works. So I guess the code needs to be a non-nullable. No, both of them. Okay, so I think this, hold on, the no load function, can you just return nulls differs to other load functions and eventually the default behavior of loading the file system. So yeah, I don't need, right? So for now, let me comment it out and then return null. So I just defers to the default behavior. Let me close this and then let's run this again. And let's see, what do we have? So if I try to visit the page, right, and then you will see that Vid is trying to load all these files, right? We have the Playwright, and then we have some Vid file, right? The key is this file, the Playwright index tsx, right? So this file, we need to load it and then we add something that additional things that we would need or do we want. So what we can do here is, of course, we need to this is the root folder. Let us define it as a variable. Root folder. And so if id equals to path.join, let me just define another variable called the entry file path. Is basically joining the root folder with the index.tsx. So if entry file path, if the id is equal to this one, I'm going to do something special, which is we're going to add code on top of it. And to make it easier, right, let me create a file here, call the custom ct, the init.ts. Okay, I'm just call it init.ts. And here let's have like initialization. Let me just have a console log to make sure that we know that we have over here, that make sure that if we see the console log, if this is being printed out, then we know that this file is being executed, right? So here, let's come back and over here in the entries file, we're gonna import that init function, right? So we don't have to copy the whole thing. We just make sure that it imports that file. Then Vid will hopefully bundle everything and then make it like magically work, right? So here I will need to add another file called our init file path, which is basically joining from the dir name with the init.ts. And in our entry file path, what we need to do here is that we will load the code, right? And then we're going to return a string plus the code. I'm going to add this thing in front of our code, which is import the init file path. Right, so when we have a custom load function, and then if it's loading the entry file path, we're gonna add this. We're gonna use the default behavior to load this this module, and then we're gonna add when we get the code, we're gonna add this import statement to our init file path, and then plus the rest of the string. And then if it doesn't match this thing, when we just return to use the default load behavior of the Vid bundlers, right? So here, one thing we need to do now is that we can try and run our code, and then we're gonna see if after we refresh the page, we're gonna see whether it tries to. Let me refresh. Seems like something is stuck. Okay, so let's come back. Let's start this. Refresh. And I'm gonna see whether it actually loads the code correctly. Right? Somehow console network, somehow some file is not loaded. It's stuck. Let's see what are they. So this file, it seems like this file cannot be read, cannot be resolved. Right? Something is wrong over here. It seems like it's going in an infinite loop. So maybe it's because of this load function. We attempt to call this.load to load itself again. Is this what gonna happen? Is this what happening? Let me see. I thought this.load is where we can. Oh no, this hook can be triggered at any time from plugin hooks by calling this.load to preload the module corresponding to the ID. So this is something that we shouldn't call within the loader itself. To prevent additional parsing overhead in case this hook already used this.parse to generate AST for some reason. Then I guess we cannot use this.load. Let me see whether is there anything that we can use this.watch file. I think we have nothing. Basically, we need to read the file content ourselves. So I'm gonna say import fs from fs promises. Here I am gonna read the content fs.read file id utf-8 await. So this is the code, and then I'm gonna prepend this thing in front. Right, so let's try again. And then I'm gonna visit this page. Seems like everything is running okay. And then we can see our initialization that is running from the init, and then with the hello, which is the code that we have from our index.tsx, right? So basically we inserted this line at the top, and then we have this line that we have that we originally have it in the init in the index.tsx, right? So basically now we can inject code, and the next thing is we need to set up that code over, set up some code in that file. All right, so first thing is we are going to let's see, in this file we're gonna use some, because in the mount function, right, we need to call this file, right? So which means there's some sort of communication, and it's from the server into the client side. So you need some sort of WebSocket or some API to trigger from this file itself, right? And let's see whether Vite has something for us to do that, right? So maybe we can use like some HMR API, maybe like the on event, able to send something, send custom events back to Vite dev server. Okay, and then on event, maybe we can, okay, client server communication, server to client. We can send custom events over here from server to client. Client side, we can use this to listen from it, right? So here, oops, hold on. We can copy this line of code, and we can set up this, right? Import meta hot, and then here I'm gonna say a custom CT mount, and then here we are logging out the message hello. Okay, and on the other side, we can have the configure server, and then we're gonna try to send message by the server, right? Let me copy this code first, and let me try over here, and then after we listen, maybe we don't need to configure server, right? We just this already have access to the server. Let me try this one, and then this is our custom city event, and we send this message hello, and let's try and see. Let's try and run. Refresh, inspect, console log. Yep, we send hello, right? So hold on, no. That's not our message. Our message is just one hello, right? So here, maybe we add console log, sending custom message, and maybe we have an interval. So let I equals to 0, set interval. I'm gonna send message every 1 second, and then this one plus I, and let's see whether our client receives it, right? So it's sending custom message. Okay, we do receive it, right? If inspect, if we refresh, you see that we actually receives this this message every second. So I think this works. Probably just now when we are not sending on interval, then it will take a while before the server client connection is established. Then maybe we send it too early before it's established, then it's lost in transit. So here we can send some message over here, right? So next thing is we need to figure out So we're gonna have a mount function. I'm gonna sense the React, the React JSX, right? So here, if I come here and let me see, if I try to testing react.tsx, a component.tsx. So if we here have something like import React from React, and then export default, maybe like this hello world, right? And come here and then we try to send this. Let's see what are we able to receive. Import component from component. And this is our message. Let's see whether it works. So here, actually, it already works, right? We already serialized this, and then this is what it receives. So this is the JSX object. It's already passed by vid. This is the JSX object where you have this thing over here like this. And so the next thing we need to do is actually mount this on top on the node, right? So one thing we can do is in our initialization file, our init file. Here is first thing is we need to find out the root element, and then we need import React from React. Let me. Right, so we will create a root from this DOM element, and then we're gonna render our application. So this is it's actually from React DOM client. So React create root from React DOM client. Create root. This one. And then when it receives, let's say root dot render the data dot message. Let's see whether that works. Let me refresh. Kill this. Let's print out the message again first. Wait, it's called message, not message. Message. Let's start our server and refresh. Whether we run into any error. Okay, we have error because there's some fields that probably shouldn't be there, right? And React is throwing error, right? So maybe here we need to handle this. I'm gonna refactor this into a function called handle mount, and this is the data. This is the React node. So here is we need to clean up the node first. To make sure that it does not have properties like I guess some of properties is like the React internal properties, and then this is causing them a problem. Right, gonna remove like owner and star, and maybe even ref and key. Right, so these things. So I'm gonna come here. I've implement this. Clean up node React node. Ref and key, right? So these are the keys. I think we just need to keep the type and the props. That's all. So maybe, let's say, type props equals React node return type and props. And then so we do the cleanup, and then with the clean node okay, I think do mutation is better than the it's okay. I think for now let's keep it this way. Clean node, and then we're gonna root.render clean node. Let's see whether this works. Right, so something like this. Save this, clear, refresh. For object with keys, type, and props, you may render a collection of children, use an array instead. So seems like it doesn't work that way. Let me see what is the issue. So first thing is that it says an array, so if I put this, let's just try random stuff first. Doesn't work, right? Okay. Probably the props.children. Let's see. So let me print out. Okay. And let me rename this to, wait, let me create a component. And let us compare what is the difference. Okay, there's a lot of things over here that isn't there by the original one, right? So okay, I think I roughly know. So in React we have this thing called a JSX from React. In import JSX. The JSX runtime. Right, and basically this is the transformation that how it should look like when we go this. After it's cleaned up, I'm gonna call this function like this, JSX with the type, and this is the props. Like this. So let's React create that whole tree structure itself instead. Right, so now now it works. You can see that there's a hello world that's being mounted over here, right? So let me clean this up. I think we might need to handle a more slightly complex node, right? So if we have something like component that is nested component, a button, hello, let me kill this server first. right? If we have something more complex, then it's still not working. Because if you take a look at our init code, if we come and go to the cleanup, please, console log React node. We clean this. You can still see that because it has children and children array, we need to actually handle recursively to all these children as well. So of course the props, we need to check the props can be either a string or an array, right? So if const children props, if children type of children array is array children, then children dot map the cleanup node props dot children equals to this one, right? I think write it this way easier, slightly cleaner or more understandable. Else props dot children equals to cleanup node props dot children. And here we only handle, we need to check that if it's if type of React node is not an object, right? Maybe it's a string, it's a number, it's Boolean or things like that. Then we actually return the React node directly, right? We don't clean up, we don't have to clean up. But if it's a React node is an object, then we take up the types and props, and then we modify all the children, we do it recursively, and then we return this, right? So now you can see we have hello world and the button, right? Everything is mounted nicely. And mind you that this is mount on the server, serialize and send it over here to the client, right? So here, once we have done this, I think we have a rough, this thing is quite working now, right? So I'm going to copy some of this code over to our mount fixture, and then we're going to see how it looks like now, right? So this recalls me something. In our test cases, we are testing a component, which maybe is a more complex case. So now I'm gonna duplicate this, right? One is to increment for normal, for HTML elements. And this one is increment for a component. Right, so for HTML elements, we just need to make sure that it mounts, and then I think for now we don't click it and do whatever. Right, so here I am going to copy our component, where's our component? This one. Right, I'm gonna copy this button in. We don't need all these things for now. And our count is 0 for now. And I expect this to contain a text like this. Right, so at least we want this basic case to work, right? Able to mount HTML elements, the component, and then able to query that component out of it. So come back to our index tsx, right? So let's split this in half. So this is basically our on the right is our code that we have to start the read server. On the left is where we have our mount fixture, right? So here let me copy some of the things, compare side by side and copy some of the code over, right? So initialization, we have root folder, entry file path, init file path. Then we have here a new plugin. So I'm gonna paste that in, and we need to import fs file system. And then that's it, right? So we visit the page, we visit the page. So in the mount phase, where we have the node, one thing we need to do is that we need to serialize the JSON and send it over, right? So for this part, we probably not really serialize. I mean, we let the vid for now, we let the vid to send it directly for us. So we have a server WS, basically it's this part. Let me copy this and paste it in. And message, instead of message, I'm going to call it data. It's a node itself. Okay. And then we return a locator to find in the page. So I'm going to say page.locator the root. Right. So basically we're able to find anything within a root node in a page. And that's it. So here we change to data, right? So I think let's just change it here as well. And we're going to change it in our init code. So this is data. And let's try and run our Playwright test. Hold on. So this is, let's disable this test first. So we're going to test the first test. This is the only test we're going to test it. And we can remove this because we cannot click on it anyway. So let's run pm test ct and run. And it passes. Okay? Can you imagine how happy I am right now? So it passes, right? Just to prove you that this actually works. If I change something like this, it will fail, right? This will fail, and the value is actually 0, right? Locator resolve unexpected value is 0, and right now we are expected string is 444 and receive is 0. And if we actually change this, right, it will actually pass us. And I mind you that this is how it works, right? When we call mount, this thing in React, it actually transposes to a JSX object. This thing we are using vid API to let me find this. We're using vid API. Let me close this. We are using vid API through the vid WebSocket because vid and the client, the browser side, they always have this communication so that you have hot module reloading. We utilizing this API to send this message, custom CT mount, send the node data in, right? This code is actually in here, right? When you call mount, we will send this thing into the browser. And on the browser side, how it works is that on the browser, we actually start our dev server to load a page on the browser, right? So we use vid over here to create a server to start the page, and we intercept the initialization file to add another line to do the initialization. So over here, we have this file, we import it. Over here, this file, the code is that we basically find the root element on the DOM, and then whenever we received a message that's coming from the vid dev server, which is being sent when we call the mount function, we receive this and we try to mount that data onto the root element. And over here we run into some issue of mounting that element because we can't because the object is already being created by the JSX function once. It has a lot of internal states and stuff like that. So what we do is we actually take out the type and the props from the JSX object and then pass it into a JSX function from React again, so that it recreates that tree structure, React tree, with the correct internals and states and stuff like that, right? So that it happens on the browser side. And so we able to recreate it, and then we mount it onto our root elements. And there you go, have that root element shown on the page where you're visiting, right? And then coming back, our test after the mount actually is sending this information and then mount it there. So in our test, now we have the button mounted on the browser. So now we are actually doing assertion. Playwright will actually check whether the browser page have this pattern and contains this text, and it confirms yes we have, and it returns and our test case passed. Yay, good for us, right? So we have done the first part. Now the second slightly more challenging part is basically trying to figure out the case where we have components, right? Components is a bit more tricky. Components is a bit more tricky because for components, we can't really this thing, if we're gonna send it, you will see that this is this gonna be the type gonna be something like undefined or something wrong with it, right? Because it's a function. The type is supposed to be a function. So let me try and show you what I mean. Firstly, of course, is let's clean up our terminal. And in our component here, let's import the counter component. Right, and then we have this over here like this. And then let's try to run our custom start with dev server. And if we refresh this page, you'll see that it complains again. You cannot mount this thing, right? And let's come back, and in here, let's print out what we actually get from the clean node, right? Let's clean. You see that this, the children, the type for our counter is actually undefined, and the children is undefined as well. Why? Well, if you see here, when the data that we receive, right? The data that we receive is also don't have a type. It's undefined. Why? Well, because when we send this, we serialize it in JSON, and then vid serialize it in JSON, send it over, and then deserialize it. But as a JSON form, one thing is that we can't serialize functions, right? If it's a function, if it's not JSON object or primitives, JSON value, all those will be turned into undefined and it's not sent over, right? So the type is undefined. We can't use this. Okay, so we need to figure out how we're gonna take it out, or how do we turn it and serialize it and send it over. So in the send function, we can't do a simple sending now. We need to figure out what it is, right? We need to figure out what the component is and try and figure out how do we load that component, right? So here, let me see where we can find this. So I think first thing is, let's kill this thing first. So in our start with dev server, right? So from here, when we want to send this component, we need to transform, we need to clean up, we need to figure out what this function is. So here, we're gonna have a function called serialize, prepare for serialization. And this function is currently return the same component. Okay. Of course, this function here now, so we need to check what is the type. If the type, the type of the type property is a string, then we know it's a HTML primitive, so we can send it over. But if the type is not primitive, it's something else. It's like if it's a non-string, it's like functions or class, then we need to do something to it, right? We need to turn it so that we know what component this refers to, right? So here, let me in this function, let's console log the component first. And then one thing we can do is we check if component.type is a string, then we return component, right? Else, if something else, we need to do something, right? So for now, I'm going to just print out the component type and see what it actually is. And of course, we need to also do it recursively for all its children. So if it's, I think I'll do it this way. If it's not string, do something, and then we also go through component dot for each dot props children. Again, we need to check whether the children is an array or it's just one element. So array component, component dot props dot children. If it's an array, then we are going to check. Okay, hold on. Same thing. If component dot type of component is not equals to a object, then we return component. Right? If it's a string array, a string number, boolean, things like that, return. We don't transform. But if it's a type, if it's an object, then if it has a type property that's not a string, we do something. Then we also do something to its children, and then eventually we try to return the component. So if it's an array, then component.props.children equals to map node prepare for serialization node. Else this will equals to this thing. Okay, so let's run our code and see what we have. Okay, so okay, so probably when React transpile it to the JSX calls, it actually locks the props property so that we can't mutate the props we cannot mutate the props object, which is undesirable. So here what we need to do is that we can't, so that's why we can't assign it to it directly, right? So what we need to do is actually we only need the type and the props, right? So here actually what we can do is we can take out the type and the props, and then we return this, right? And actually props, I'm gonna say, is we create a new object of it, so we don't have to, so that we can mutate this props in the end, right? So here, if the type is string, then we do something, and then if this is, and then we do something to children, right? So here, let's try run this again. Okay, looks okay, but the thing is, there's a function and there's a div, right? So for function, we know that this is a counter function. We have we can see the function name, right? So one thing we can do is maybe we record this name and then we do something with it. Okay, so if it's type, if we have this one, then I'm gonna change the type to maybe like a component colon and then the name of the component, right? So this is basically the type dot name. If it's a function, then function dot name, right? Yeah, if it's a function component, it's function dot name. If it's a class, then I guess it's the type dot constructor name, So this is the component with a name like this, right? So here, after we transform it this way, let's try and run our code again. So this time around, if you refresh, should not see anything again. But then of course we have a element that looks like this, which is incorrect. On the component types equals. Wait, why is the type of this one? Alright, so here we have div, and then children we have a component function. Oh no, okay, so I guess we still need to get this thing instead. The constructor, the class name. Okay, anyway, I think I might have mistaken the thing. So for now, let's do it this way. So you can see this is a component called counter, right? And we have this, it basically works now. There's no complaints, but then of course we don't see the counter component on the screen because this component, if you inspect, you'll notice that we have a DOM element called component counter, right? But it's not what we want. We want the component class, the component, the functional component, the counter component, right? So what we can do here now is that we can come here and let's see, component. So in our init function, if we have a mapping of the components, right? So this is a huge if. Of course, later we will need to figure out how to create this mapping. If we have a mapping of counter is the counter component, right? If this is this thing, right? If we have this mapping, then when we in the init function, when we are going to mount the node, what we can do is we can go to, for each node we can check, right? If type starts with component colon, right? Because here we send component colon. If it starts with this one, then type dot how many characters is this? 1, 2. Okay, let me just slice dot length to get the component name. And this one we're gonna do the mapping, like mapping over here, mapping. So the first of all is the component name is this one, and mapping component name type should be mapping of the component name like this. Okay, so once we change this, notice that this now we have our component, right? Because basically when we are after we serialize, if it's a function name, we change the type into component colon the component name, send it over, and when we receive it, we realize that okay, we have component colon something. Then we take it out. We take out we're able to parse out the component name, and then look up in our mapping, and then we found this component, and then we use it, and here we have used it to create our JSX element, and then we mount it on the DOM. And here is how you get this DOM over here, right? So this is basically the idea of what they say, right? When they do the component testing, where they under the hood, this is where it where they have the list. This is where you say Playwright creates a list of components that needs to test, that the test needs, right? So I believe this is the list is the mapping itself, and then when we mount this one, right, it will actually try to it will navigate and then try to figure out and then render that component, right? So this is where it when it sends the data over, it will check and then it will see, oh, you need this component, let me look up from what I have pre-bundled, and then let me take it out and then put it in for us, right? So this is something that we need to have a way to create this mapping, right? This mapping is what we need to do our testing, right? So we need to create this mapping, and so let me see how we can create this mapping. So in order to create this mapping, right, is the first thing is we need to know what is the components that is being, what are the components that are being rendered, and what are the components that is imported into our test files, right? So I guess like one idea that I can think of is it probably look into this file itself and then figure out that, okay, counter, this component is here, and this comes from this file. So I'm gonna create a mapping of something that looks like this, right? That looks like this. Maybe it's more of like this. Maybe it's more like this, right? We create this mapping. I think this is more feasible. Maybe it looks like something that looks like this. Or maybe, yeah, maybe this one. Maybe the mapping looks like this, right? Because if we change it this way, this does not work again, but we can make some changes to our code to make sure it works. So firstly is the cleanup function, right? We need to load all the components first, right? Maybe one way we can do is here in our cleanup handle mount, make it asynchronous because we need to wait for a dynamic import. And here in our cleanup, maybe we first thing is to load node, React node, load component needed, right? And then here, so here when we in the load component needed, maybe we have, this is the mapping and this is the component mapping, right? So this is the, let me rename this. This is the component loader mapping. And this is the actual component mapping, right? So the load component needed here is React node. I'm gonna copy all the logic, similar logic over here. This one, I'm gonna copy this. Right, but we don't need this thing. And if it starts with this one, we take out the component name. And we have the await this function, component loading. This should be a function. And then we need to set it to our component mapping. Component mapping, component name equals to this one. And then if we have children, okay, we still need props. If we have children, then for each children, we also need to call the load component needed, right? So we have the promise.all over here. And then here, we also need to wait for load component needed like this. Right, so we wait for the component needed, and then we're going to clean up. Basically, is the transformation. Hopefully we already have the mapping. Then this one is the component mapping, give us the type, right? If you save this, refresh this page, something is still wrong somewhere. Hold on, where is this thing? Oh, we need to get the default, right? Import. When we set, this should be the default. So like this. Async await dot default. Yeah. So it works now, right? So now we basically need to build out this mapping, right? With this thing like this, we build out this mapping and we can dynamically load the components we needed, right? So here, I guess we can come over here to this file to find out all the imports, maybe, whether it's default imports, name imports, stuff like that, and then also look up for it whether it's being used inside a JSX statement. And then from there, we figure out, okay, what are the components? We create this mapping. And then hopefully we can have this mapping being used. We generate this mapping, right? So I guess that's something that we'll have to figure out how we do that, right? So we have this mapping and then we send it to the browser, and then hopefully that will be the thing that we need to do. So let's see. I think first thing is, let me create another file called parse test file. And I'm not sure even we can get the file name of the test file that we are parsing over here. Let me check whether we can actually get in our fixtures, whether we can actually know what is the current test information, right? So here, fixtures, custom fixture, creating a fixture, fixtures options, or maybe we check file meta test info. Get test info in Playwright fixture, custom fixture. Let's see whether we can browser request, browser name request, predefined fixtures that you're likely to use most of the time without fixture, with fixture, fixtures options, execution order, test configuration, test use option, fixtures. I guess we don't know, right? Let's see. Is there a way to know which? I guess there's no way to know which test files we are running from the fixtures point of view, right? So I guess for now I'm gonna copy this file path and then use this file path and figure out the what is the imports and what are the component maps over here that we can have, right? So here I am going to copy imports file system promises imports path from node path, and then we are going to so the path for the component testing test file is equals to parse path.join dir name component.test.tsx. Right, so we need to figure out what is the import, what are the components that's being used in this file, right? So what we can do here is that, let's see, I am going to use something that I'm more familiar with, which is Babel. So I'm going to use Babel to do the parsing. pm install save dev. Because Babel supports all TypeScript syntax and different syntaxes. So Babel, when it parses, I guess it's Babel should be able to handle this kind of it should be able to handle TypeScript files, right, without much fiddling needed, right? So I'm gonna import from Babel transform. No, I think it doesn't have much type definition, so we need to go to the website and check. Right, so we have the parse a file, and then we can have the parse and traverse. So traverse is a separate package, so maybe let's copy this as well. So you can parse the code and then we traverse. So here, let's first is gonna create a function called parsing async. So we have the parse, right? We have the parse async. First thing is we read the content of the code first. Content equals to fs.read file, test file, utf-8, await, parse async content, and the parse options is this, right? We have plugins and presets and stuff. So I think let's leave it for now first. So this should return us AST. Right, and then we can use this AST to traverse. Right, so we have a traverse function, and then we're gonna write the traverse function. So we're gonna await for this one, and then we're gonna traverse. So traverse is from Babel traverse. Also don't have much type definition. This is parse async. So let's first thing first, let's console out parse. Log the AST, and then let's see what we have. Right, so I'm gonna parse, and I'm gonna call vid node to run this. Custom ct parse test file. And we're missing some plugins syntax because we can't support reading a TypeScript file, right? So we will need to have a plugin. Name syntax at supported syntax, and the plugin should have, let's see, how do I enable this one? Let me quickly do a search. I remember there is this thing called packages syntax. JSX. So this plugin turns on the JSX syntax, and actually it's just like this. It has this manipulate options here, parser options, and then turn on the JSX. So I think we can turn on the TypeScript instead, because we know we are doing TypeScript, and then I believe TypeScript syntax knows how to differentiate between a TS and TSX, right? But for that, we actually need to tell Babel the file name of the thing that we are parsing, right? The file name, because basically TypeScript checks whether it's a TS or TSX files, and then determine whether it should parse a TSX or TS, right? So here we specify file name, and I have the plugin to turn on the TypeScript syntax. Let's try and run and see whether this works now. Right, it does not. It always does not work like this. So I guess we can also turn on JSX. No, it does not work. So maybe this is not even being executed. Is it? Yes, it is being executed. So, so we added TypeScript. Is it not called TypeScript? Let's see. Source index. Parser options. Yep, we need to push TypeScript in. It's correct. Maybe the order. I don't know. Okay, I also want to add the disallow ambiguous JSX like this one in here. But let me try run this first. Eh? I don't understand. This one is enabled, right? JSX isn't currently enabled. Syntax error. So I'm gonna push this, and also gonna push this, and then we're gonna copy this as well. The disallow ambiguous JSX like to true. I believe it's true. No, it doesn't work. Hold on, let me think. Why we added the plugins but it doesn't work? Manipulate options, parser options. Is there other way to turn on? Oh, there's a parser ops. Okay, maybe we use this instead. JSX, TypeScript. Let's try run this. Parser ops must be an object or undefined. or plug. Oops. Yeah, it's called a parser options.plugins, right? So there should be like this plugin, like this. Okay, it works now. Now next thing is that the Babel traverse, probably this should be a default import, right? So we're able to parse it out, then we need to traverse. We're able to traverse this. So now let's see how we're gonna traverse this thing, right? So I actually have a video about how do you do traversing in Babel. You can check the link in the description for that. So for this one, I'm gonna copy this file, and I'm gonna go to the Babel ASD Explorer. I'm gonna paste this in and use the Babel parser to check to see the ASD tree for the Babel, right? So one thing, what we need to check, we need to take out from here is that we need to go through all the import statements, right? So any import specifier, we're gonna record where it is from, right? The source, where the file is from, and where the what is being imported, right? So for that one, I'm gonna every time when I go to a import default specifier, right? So this one I can remove now. So whenever I enter a path called import default specifier node, right? We are going to keep track. So we're gonna have a mapping import map. Okay, so I'm gonna print this out later on to see whether what we have taken out. So whenever I have import default import, I'm gonna check what we are importing, right? So we have the import, the node is we have the local name, right? And yeah, we have local name. So name is equals node.local.name. And then where is it from is basically its parents, so it's in its parent, so it's node.parent dot source dot value path source path equals to this one. And so we're gonna keep a mapping of it. So import map name, import map name equals to source path. So let's see what we have. Maybe this is the path. Bring a local. Let me see how do I write this. It's been a while since I write a Babel parser traverser. This should be, this is the path, right? Path. So what you need to do is that path.node, path.parent, path.node. Right, so I have React coming from React, counter coming from component, the file name, right? Of course, after we get the path, we actually need to transform it based to the test file, right? So for const key in import map, so the value is import map key, if the value starts with, okay, I guess the first character is a dot, then value needs to become import map key needs to become path.join from this current file. Like this. Why dot dot? Because this file, we need to go back to its parent, and then it's actually relative from its parent, right? So let's see. Then we have this path, right? Playwright. Actually, right? I think this is much easier to resolve without doing this one. Is it? No, actually, no. I should use this one. Create require from node module. Yeah. Use the require resolve to resolve the path. Right. So here is create require based on the test file. Like this one. So I create a require function based on this file path. So this require function, you can imagine this require function is in this file, this module. If you have a require function, this is that require function. So when you require something, it is resolved based on that, right? So here I'm gonna call the require.resolve for the value. Then it should be whatever it is that, right? So you cannot find component, then which means you cannot find component. That's because we import component by TSX, right? So I guess if we do this one, then it can resolve it now, right? Because it doesn't support TSX extension. Unless we change something like require resolve. I'm not sure whether add custom extension. Yeah, I don't even know we can have custom extension for now, but I don't think it is, right? But it does not have that, so let's just add an extension for it to much easier to resolve to. And you can see that this is what it resolves to, right? This is the correct path for the thing. And I don't even need to check, like I can not even checking this one because it can also resolve React directly from this file path if it wants to, right? So let me show you like that, right? So this one, we can actually have, right, something like this. It'll work, right? It will resolve to where React is and also to the component where component is, right? So after we have this, right, next thing is we need to go through and check actually which of this component is actually something that we are, which of the component is actually something that we are actually needed, actually what we actually need to import, right? So so that we don't, the mapping actually is not everything else, right? So not any function or whatever it is, it's just those components, right? So next thing we can do is we're gonna go to all the JSX syntax, right? It's like JSX identifier, and then find a name, right? JSX identifier name, right? And then we collect the name, right? Set equals to names, new set. So for each name, I'm gonna add it to our sets name dot. This is the path.node.name, right? And only if the key, if the set has the variable name that we have, then we're gonna add it to our import map, right? So I think this is like the result, like this one, right? Only if we have then only if this thing that we import is in the set of the JSX element name, right? If it's only in here, then we add it to our map, right? So if I have this thing, and you can see if I run now, I only have counter and the path to it. Okay, so this is beautiful. This is amazing. So let me copy this thing, this whole code over here, and go back to our custom mount function. I'm gonna come here, and then I'm gonna have this function over here, right? Our parse. So we will need to, some of this we don't need. Some of this can move to the top. Okay, so when we initialize this thing, we need to parse and figure out what is the mapping, right? So here we can, we will wait for the parse. And then this should return us the mapping, right? Instead of printing out, return the result. So we have the component mapping. Okay, so for the component mapping, and then here, we need to pass this component mapping into our code so that we can use it in the init function, right? In somewhere here, the component loader mapping. We need to have a way to define this one, right? So, but this file, we don't want to change this file. So one thing I can think, one maybe like a indirection of way of doing it is that maybe we can create a variable called let's component loader mapping, like this one. And then we can define a variable on the window scope, window dot set component loader mapping as a function. And then we're gonna set this mapping, right? So it's a bit like a bit of an indirection, but at least we have a variable, we have a global function that we can call from somewhere else, not in this module. The reason of me thinking of doing it this way is because here now in our server, after we do this this thing, we can actually add a few more lines of code to set up to serialize this component mapping, right? So here what I can do is I have this function, and then I can, right? And this is the mapping that we are going to have over here, right? There's this mapping over here. So component mapping, I'm going to put this whole thing in here. Well, of course, this has to be a string. Right now, it's not a string. So we're going to turn it into a string and then put it in here, set component mapping. So this way, after we import our path, and then we set up the component mapping, and then we have our code. And then that way, when we do mount, we have the mapping of the component, right? So here, come back over here in our results before we, I think the result here, we can change a bit. So here is, we will have the let result is like this. Okay, I think let me just make it an array easier. No need. Result plus equals to this one. And then return results. Right, so here for every key, we are going to have result plus equals to the key colon, and then remember what we had previously. Oh shit, I can't remember. Oh, this one, right? We have this thing, right? Async something await import the path. So the path is this one, right? What we have resolved over here. Okay, so we have this thing like this, and then return this whole thing as a map, as a string. And then here we're gonna serialize it. So this is part of like serialization. We're gonna send to the component mapping over here. We set it in our init module. We set this mapping, and then hopefully later on when we need to do something, we need to mount the component, the counter is there for us, right? So so to make sure we don't have a mapping for the component, we don't know what the component is from here, but later on, when we want to run our test in our Playwright test CT, we want to able to we parse the file of our test cases, figure out what components we're going to use, and then we have that import statement of that file, those components serialized into our initial entry file of our dev server, right? So when we see those things, when we insert those things in, and later on when we start the dev server, we visit the page, and when we send the mount function, and then we find through this mapping, we realize that, okay, what a component we need to mount, and then we import those files, actually call the import, load those files, and come back in, load those files, and then we render mount set component onto the DOM, right? So hopefully that is the idea. Let's see whether it works. So let's run test CT, and then running 2 tests, and then, okay, I think something is not correct here, because we're not supposed to run 2 tests at the same time. We're not supposed to start the dev server, 2 dev server at one time, right? We didn't handle this edge case, but bear with it for now. We're not gonna handle it, so we'll just run with just 1 test case instead. So we're gonna run this test case, and then we are not able to mount anything, right? We are not able to find anything on the roots. So let's debug. So here, debug. So let's start our browser, right? And the next step is we're gonna go to this page, right? So here we have our page on. It should be so we should already load this index.tsx file, right? So let's take a look what is inside. Just check whether the content looks okay. Right, so here we have this one, and then we are calling this with this counter, with this whole thing like this. So far, no errors, looks okay. Now, next thing is we're gonna step through, gonna call the mount function, right? On the mount, load component. Okay, so this is what we sent. Okay, I think I know what's wrong. So here, we need to copy some of the code that we have in our start bit server. So this one, the prepare for serialization, this function, we need to copy it over. So, whoops, copy, right? So we're gonna call it like this over here in our mount, right? So here we need to, let's create this function, prepare for serialization. I'm gonna call it this way, save this. Okay, let's try run the test again. This time, I trust us. We don't run with the debug mode. And no, still not working. Okay, let's try to debug what's wrong. Okay, same thing over here. Let's load the page, and then let's mount. And I think we have a component on the screen. So what's wrong with this? So when I click on the component, okay, I'm clicking on the div instead of clicking on the button itself, so it does not change to 1. Okay, at least I'm quite surprised. I'm speechless, wordless for now, because we're actually able to mount this component onto the screen. It's just that our test case is incorrect because we're not clicking on the button, right? So this one I can get by role, get our button, and then click on the button itself. So here now let's try run again. Run our test. It works. Okay, it works. And then let's not run this test. Let's run the previous test. Just make sure that that works as well. Right? And that works as well. Okay, so we managed to run this, managed to implement our custom component testing over, oh my god, how long did it take? If you survived through this video and you watched throughout the whole thing, you had my highest respect, right? So we managed to figure this whole thing out. Of course, there's a lot of room to improvement. From what I see is that the actual Playwright component testing, it does caching. It does not always build this vid. It does not start the vid as a dev server. It actually builds the vid bundle and start a simple dev server to load the build output from the vid bundling. And one thing I also noticed is that the building starts when they starts to at the very start, right? If you remember when we used the old define config, it actually starts building. So I believe there in the Playwright config, there's a way to start a dev server, and starting that dev server is actually where it start the building first before, and then wait for the server to be ready, and then only we start the testing, right? So actually it run once, build once, rather than what we have now is actually every test case we start when we use the mouse fixture, every time we use the mouse fixture, we actually start the vid server, which is not that optimal, okay? So that is something that I noticed the Playwright component testing does. And of course, one more thing is that it caches the build, and then so every time when you make changes to a test file, we don't have to start the vid dev server or vid build again every time we start the dev testing, right? We only need to do that if the source code, the component itself, has changed, right? So as you can see over here, we're already able to do parsing and then figure out all the import statements. So we can actually check all these import statements, especially for those components that we're using. We check the import statement and components to see whether have they changed since the last time we actually building them, right? If actually we don't need the util function, only the component, because that is where we do the component mapping. That is the most critical part, right? So if we check the component and all the dependencies of the component has not changed since the last time you built, right? Based on some timestamp, you can record that down. It have not been changed. So then I guess we can skip the building, right? So we can check, as we are building in our vid plugin, as we are building those components, we can check the last updated time for each of the file of the dependencies. And if none of them has changed since and the next time when trying to build, none of them has changed, then we can know that we don't have to do the building again, right? So it saves some time. So that's it for this video. Again, you have my highest respect of watching throughout this video. So we have gone through explaining what is component testing, and then it's more of like my personal thing that I also want to figure out how it actually works, because it's quite fascinating. And also, you never fully understand something until you implement it, and you realize that, oh, actually, this is how it works, right? Go through the small tiny details and figure those things out. Of course, now we just able to figure out the whole proof of concept, but the actual thing that they do, as I mentioned, they have caching, they have pre-building and all these things. There's even more things under the hood that are worth for us to explore and then test it out, our idea whether actual implementation matches our expectations, right? So I guess thank you, and we're gonna see you in my next video. Bye bye.